Hello, everyone. It's Kevin, and welcome to the Cosmic Perspective. On today's episode, I have a friend of mine who I met through improv, and I know it's becoming a trend. Almost all of my friends I met through improv. You're right. It's kind of like that. And on this episode, we have my friend Trevor, and he is a teacher. So he tells all about his teaching experience in an area that has some underprivileged kids and what he has done to try to keep them engaged in the school system. You're going to hear some funny stories. You're going to hear some touching ones. And this is definitely one that I really enjoy doing. And I know in the moment, I certainly was just having a blast. So I hope you guys do too. And without further ado, here's the podcast. Thank you, Trevor, for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. So for the audience, Trevor is a teacher, and he has some very interesting stories about the kids that he teaches with, and I'll let him start out the first story. But yeah, tell him a little bit about what your kids are like.
Yeah, just to start it off, they're insane. I love them. I teach 7th grade science, and so they're at an age where they're young, so they get away with stuff and they like to act immature, but they think they're adults. So like they can't have their phones and they freak out. They're like, "Oh my gosh!" I'm like, "You forgot your binder in my class the last 3 days. Let's try to keep a week with all your materials before we give you your cell phone," and they freak out. But I love it because they're still kids, so you could tease them and joke with them. And in fact, I was thinking about it earlier. This is a really recent story. It was this week. And a student, a little kid, he gave a ring to a teacher across the hall from me. Mm-hmm. And he said they were married, and the kids were laughing, and the teacher was wearing the ring around the school. And so it was a thing, ha, they're married. They're such a cute couple. And then over lunch, I was with the teacher, and I said, "You got to do me a favor. Let me see the ring, and we're going to tease him that him and I are married." And she said, "Oh, my God." So she took the ring off, and they gave it to me, and I put it on my ring finger. And then it was after lunch. It was the class, and I started the class off all serious. I was like, "Guys, I have some terrible news. There was a wedding the other day, and it didn't work out. And through some strange confluence of events, I now have the ring." And I held my hand up, and it was the ring that the student gave to the other teacher. And I said, "Oh my God, you and I are married now." And my class went crazy. And it was funny because I was waiting for the joke to be over right away. And the kid, he was like, "What? No, that's not how it works. No. I don't agree to this." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, we're married. I have the ring. There's nothing we could do." And the kids went crazy. And the joke ended, and I was like, "All right, I'm just going to go give the ring back to the teacher." So I just walked across the hall. The kids had some bell ringer work to do. So I went across the hall, and instead of just handing it to the teacher, I got down on one knee, and I proposed to her in front of her class. And instead of being like, "What are you doing, weirdo?" she jumped up and down and clapped her hands like, "Oh my gosh, yes, I 100% accept." And the kids in her class went crazy. Kids were falling out of their chair. They're like, "Oh my gosh." And it was nonsense. And it just all started because this one boy had a crush on the teacher. And so then I went back to my classroom, and we were talking, and I was joking about it, and the kid still was like, "No, Mr. Bradkey, it can't happen. We're not going to be married." Like, he just didn't understand it was a joke. Everyone was in on it but him. And then the story ends yesterday, right before the end of school. The student council was selling things for Valentine's Day. It was just it's just old stuff, and they were trying to get rid of it. And so as the kids were walking out to the bus, it's full of people, I bought a chocolate rose, and I presented it to the teacher that I had married in front of the other kids. And so the kids in the hallway were like, "Oh man, oh." And that's how they were going to the bus, was one teacher proposed to an already married teacher across the hall. So that's kind of an introduction to the kind of kids we're working with.
Oh man. So like, what would you say the general reaction is to your antics? Because you did improv. You're definitely a comedian. Mm-hmm. Like, that's certainly the core of who you are. And there's no way you don't bring that into your class, like, in general. I mean, hence the story you just told us. So like, what do you think like your reputation is in school?
I like to think it's affectionately, but I'm definitely seen as a psychopath in school because I'm not young by any stretch. I'm 25, but I'm the youngest teacher in the school. So what happened is I'm the closest in age to the kids, and so some of the teachers, some of the teachers, I'm closer in age to their own children than I am them, and so what happens is I'm kind of seen as just a big kid because I tell the kids, I'm like, I remember being in your shoes. I remember my 7th grade science class. I remember being in middle school and all that, and so immature I think it's an incorrect term because I'm definitely childish, but I think it's good because I teach in a district that over 75% of the kids are on free and reduced lunch. It's high poverty area, and school isn't seen as important. It happens all the time when I talk to the parents. It's just not a priority for them, and so it carries over to the kids. And so what I see my job is, because I mean, let's be honest, science is important, but no one becomes a scientist in middle school. It doesn't happen. And so my goal is to definitely teach them some science, but I've kind of made it my mission to make school as tolerable as possible just so they stay, so they keep coming back another year. And I do it, and that's why I kind of act insane. I mean, I do silly things, like I trip kids all the time. Like I stand in front of my door, and I just foot out just at kid after kid, and no one's falling on the ground, but they stumble, and then they look at me, and they get mad. They're like, Mr. Berge, that's not funny. And I'm like, I think it's hilarious. And it's just small stuff like that to the point now where if I'm in the hallway talking to a teacher or in front of my door, kids will actively like walk around me, or they'll stare at my feet waiting for me to try to trip them. And it's just, I think stuff like that just makes it kind of fun because it's not this serious, boring, horrible place. It's right. We're going to do some work today, but before that, my teacher's going to try to trip me, and just stuff like that.
Yeah, you keep them on their toes.
Right.
Something I want to touch on because I feel like that was important is that school is not considered important to them, and so you're trying to find ways to keep them engaged.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's very hard. It's pretty common in education, especially for teachers, that teachers suck when they're new. I mean, I was told this by everybody I worked with last year that like you suck as a teacher, and it hurts the ego a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, but then they all say that they're like, no, it's just understandable. Even this year, I've changed so dramatically for the better in terms of the way I bring the information to the kids, the hands-on activities we do, but still compare myself to the 6th grade teacher who's been a huge help to me since I started. He is 1,000 times better than me. And it's because they've done it a long time. And that's kind of a general policy is you got to do it. You got to keep doing it. It's like anything, stand-up improv. The more you do, the better you get. And so I'm doing my best to bring as much education to them as I possibly can, while also at the same time not making them sit down and write notes for, 9 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, because the truth is that learning is not coming from just fucking taking notes all the time. Right. I mean, it's important. You should write down information and remember it, but I mean, if you're not engaged in it, then you're not really going to commit anything to memory. You're going to dump it as soon as the test is over. Exactly,
and that's a big thing. I've actually been lucky enough. I went to 2 different conferences this year for science teachers, and the themes for both have been bringing education to kids because, I mean, I'm a science nerd. So I sit there and I love to read. Like last night on a Friday night, I was reading about how gravity keeps the atmosphere from floating into space. And that was just like the most fun I've had. But to most kids, that's not the case. And so it is hard because you want to find what's interesting. But the most important thing is you want to make it relevant to them. So just quick example, this last test was on electricity. It was our chapter. It took us over a month. And electricity is fascinating, but it's super complicated. So you flip through the books, and there's so much nonsense that the kids don't need. And so I kind of have to walk a line where I'll just like rip pages out of the book. I'm like, yeah, we're just not doing that. And so like lightning was big. The kids enjoyed it. So we demonstrated how it goes. We did it in class, how to make it with just basic household materials. And so I try to focus on lightning. Or we talked about sticking keys and forks into outlets, and the kids a bunch of kids are like, oh, I volunteer as tribute. I'll do it. I want to do it. And, I couldn't let them. But we built circuits. We just hooked up wires to batteries. And I was shocking myself on the D-cell battery. You lick it. Just stuff like that because that brings the kids in when it's relevant and it's things they see in their everyday life. Then all of a sudden it's, oh, maybe this guy, is kind of for real. Maybe let's listen to something he has to say. And in middle school, that's definitely a victory.
Yeah. I mean, middle school is a tough age because they're old enough to, like, I don't know, to fuck off and to not take it seriously and to know it's kind of bullshit. But then they're also young enough to still be impressionable and that you can still influence the direction of their life, right?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. Right. They're at that age where they are kids, so you can still have a positive impact. You can still be a good role model. You can do all that. But they think they're old enough. So, right, they see the high schoolers, like the girls can't wear like spaghetti strap shirts. Mm-hmm. So they see the high schooler doing it and they're like, oh my God, why can she do it? That's so unfair. It's like, oh, it's because she's 18 and she went through middle school already. You're barely passing 7th grade. Let's focus on, that before we give you your cell phone and things. So yeah, you're right. It is an age. I mean, I liked middle school. It still was a horrible time in my life. It was just hard because you have hormones. You have all of a sudden this giant group of people that you didn't go to school with, and it's hard. And especially in the district we work in, it's just difficult. And so that's why you find, even with some of the other teachers, there's a lot of ways that we just joke around, mess around, try to make it fun because, right, it's uncommon. It's not uncommon for parents to tell me, oh yeah, I just was never good in science in school, so that makes sense that, my kid's failing. And that's acceptable to them. In a parent-teacher conference, they're okay with their kid having an F because they're, oh, I had an F in school. And so that's kind of what these teachers are fighting. And that's why I try to
break the cycle.
Absolutely. And it's definitely hard. And I hate to sound cliche because I sound like some douchey, pre-education teacher that's excited and their spirit hasn't been broken yet. But it's one of those things where, right, if you reach 4 kids, 5 kids, that's a victory in a group of 120. And I'm not saying I've reached any kids yet. I would never say that. But I do know that I have a reputation throughout the school as a guy that is fun. Now, whether I'm a talented science teacher is yet to say, and I think my belief and the kids' beliefs are different on that, but definitely the reputation around school is, yeah, his class is interesting. In fact, several times I've been not yelled at, but complained the teacher next door. She'll like come in and just like put her hands up and be like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, sorry, I had to throw a chair to demonstrate something. Or like I throw chairs. Like I'm loud. I scream a lot. You know that. And so won't be uncommon for every couple of weeks for her to come and be like, excuse us. And I'm like, oh yeah, sorry, I forgot I was screaming again. My bad. Just
wow. Wait. So there is a story that I definitely want you to talk about, and it does involve desks. Please tell that story.
All right. Yeah, I'm loud. Since I was a kid, I'm a big dude. I'm 6'3". I'm a large fella. I'm heavy. And it's just, as long as I can remember, my voice has been loud, like towering. And I like to use it. In improv, I like to get loud and scream. Even in our acting class, I love to get loud and just like scream this monologue. And it shocks people, and I enjoy that. And so in my classroom, the first year, I did that all the time. And what happens is you find out real fast that the kids don't respond to that. That's just, oh, he yells, whatever. So silence, again, be cliche, silence is much more powerful than the loudest scream. And so this year, I've done a lot better about not only screaming when it's funny and when I have a point to make, but like to get their attention, I'll stand with my arms crossed, or I'll lean against the board, just wait for them, and then they go, oh, shut up, he's waiting on us. And sometimes, especially at the end of the day, it's a problem-based learning class, and it's a free-for-all. It's not science. It's science projects. It's not my regular curriculum. And so sometimes I'll like punch a desk, and everyone in the room just turns and looks. It's like in the Old West, if you'd walk into like a saloon and you'd shoot a gun in the air, like the piano player would stop. That's kind of what it was like. And so I had done it a couple times, and it was the end of the day, and it was really, really loud. And I don't remember what it was, unfortunately, but they were worked up. It was something happened. We had an assembly or something. So it was just chaotic. And so I was like, all right, I need to get attention, cue my pistol in the saloon moment. So I just go to punch the desk. And instead of, you hit the desk and the books fly up, instead my fist just went through and a whole circular chunk just popped right out of the desk. And, it was way better than anything I've ever done in school. It got everyone's attention. And I mean, it was silent for about 5 seconds. And then it was even louder than it was before I punched the desk because now everyone's like, oh my God, Mr. Bradkey just broke a desk. And And so it was chaos. And I'm saying desk, it's tables. I have these bigger tables. And so there's like seats for 3 people. And right in just the middle, I punched a hole in it. And it's still in my room. I don't want to get rid of it because it's a nice table. So there's 3 kids that sit in their front seat, their front table. And the middle kid just kind of has to put books over the hole so he could use it because otherwise it just falls in.
Oh, my God.
So that was discipline gone wrong, I guess.
Discipline gone wrong. Now, usually when you like something is broken, you got to report it to the school. So how did you avoid that?
I just didn't say anything. Actually, there's an end to the story. But first, I put a note because I didn't want the custodian to be like, "What the heck?" So I put a note and I just said, "Student broke this. Student will fix it tomorrow." And that was several weeks ago, and no one said a word about it. But actually, to finish the story, what happened was I broke the desk, and like I said, the class got super loud, and then I just said, "Quiet," and everyone listened because they're like, "Uh-oh, what does this psycho got to say next?" And so what I did was, it was the most responsible thing I could have thought of at the time. And I looked at a kid and I said, "Oh my God, I can't believe you just broke the desk." And he freaked out. "What? I didn't break the desk. I didn't break the desk." And so I was like, "Guys, isn't it messed up that we all watched him break the desk?" And 90% of the class was like, "Yeah, oh my God, why'd you break the desk?" And so he swore up and down, "I didn't break it. I didn't break it." So then the next day, it just, as many times as I possibly could, I brought it up. "Oh, I can't believe he broke the desk. He broke the desk." And to this day, weeks later, he's still like, "Yeah, I broke the desk." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know, you just admitted it." He's like, "I was being sarcastic." And we're like, "We don't know what sarcasm is. We watched you break the desk." And so then whenever a kid asks me anything, I just tell them yes. Like, not about school, but like outside things. Like, "Oh my God, I heard so-and-so broke the desk." "Yep." "I heard he kicked it with his foot." I'm like, "Yep." And then some other kid's like, "No, someone told me he headbutted it." I was like, "He did." And so we just like to keep as many rumors going as possible. So at any given time, if you ask a 7th grader, several kids could have done it. Some kids still think I did it. Even though there was 25 kids that watched me do it, there's only about 6 kids that are like, "No, I know you broke it." And we're like, "Nope, we got the whole 7th grade to think it was another student."
We know who's grown up to be snitches.
Exactly. So now I know. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's fun. I enjoy it, and I probably shouldn't do that because I'm an adult and he's in 7th grade. But it's one of those things where it's harmless. He'll never get in trouble for it. Obviously, if it ever became a problem, I would take the blame. But it's funny because right now, that's a thing that the kids have. They have science, math, social studies, English, and then right before lunch, someone's going to bring up that he broke a desk, and now they have conversation at lunch. So
yeah, you give them something to bond over, a little collective lie that everybody gets to join.
Exactly. Yeah, it's an inside joke. Now everyone's in on it, and they feel better.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So when do you think? Because that's a hilarious story. When do you think you've connected most with like a student? Like, is there any situation where maybe a kid was bullied or something where you were able to like step in and really give them support?
Yeah, I would say the biggest way I'm capable of that, it's never in front of the kids. It's always
private
after school, because now this year, every teacher, we stay, we don't get paid for it or anything. We stay 1 day a week, an extra hour. And it's for tutoring if the kids need it, if they need to make up work, they do stuff like that. Well, I have a good relationship with the kids. Like I'm maybe notorious around the school, but so like I'll be ready to leave at like 3:00 and I'll have like 6 kids in my room. Before I know it, it's like 4:15 and I'm like, I should have left an hour ago. What am I doing here? And they're like, "Oh no, stay a little bit longer." So all the stuff we've handled is like that. Or a kid, like, I mean, I don't want to bring it down, but we've had several instances where DCFS, the Department of Children and Family Services, were called, and kids can come to you. And there's another teacher, the one I proposed to actually, and she's kind of the lightning rod for all this because she's kind of like me. She's kind of wild, but she is, she's a mom. She has kids, so she's much more supportive than I am. So a lot of kids go to her, but then she'll bring me in. Like there was a student was being hit by his stepdad, and he didn't know what to do. And for weeks we noticed there was something wrong. He wouldn't tell anyone, and finally he told us one day, and it was awful. And unfortunately, I didn't know what to tell him, so I just kind of teared up, and I mean, I'm laughing because I'm uncomfortable, but that's what it was. And the solution kind of unraveled. We had to contact the authorities, and they came in, and things have gotten better. He's in a better mood. We've kind of asked him very subtly, and things are okay. Another one was a kid knew his dad was cheating on his mom,
Ooh.
and he was bawling his eyes out one day for like an hour, like through our free period, through our lunch, because he said, if his mom found out, she would leave him. But she said, but they would be homeless because they have no money. Mom didn't speak English, only spoke Spanish. And so it's just stuff like that. And like I said, I'm not a therapist. I'm not even experienced enough to be super helpful, but I think my brand of humor and my jokiness and my loftiness, I think helps the kids out, because they go home, and it's super common. I coach Lego robotics. There's kids on the team that, they have to go home because they have to cook their 3-year-old brother dinner, or they have to watch these kids. And so some of these kids, they leave lives that are more adult than, like me or you. And it's really unfortunate. And so when they come to school, at least when they're in my room, they're off the clock, and it's, let's watch this gigantic clown teach us science and find a way to, make us laugh over something that is nothing related to science at all. So that's kind of how I do it. I'm not like Mother Teresa or anything. I'm just kind of like a comedian who just goes up there and they get a free show to watch, and then they leave my room maybe a little bit in a better mood than they came in.
Damn. And that's really all you can do to some extent, because you can't change their home life. You can't change who their parents are. You can just do what you can in the time that they engage with you, and be someone that they can reach out to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where I am myself, and it's strange because the kids do connect to you, and I have every teacher kind of has it, where they have kids that just don't leave them alone. So like, I'm a 7th grade teacher, so the kids that are in 8th grade are still in our hallway, and they just follow me around. They're by my room, and it's just because they liked me last year and they won't leave. And now there's kids that hate me, absolutely. You could see the look of contempt in their eyes, but it is, you're making a difference, or not even difference. You know that you're important to somebody because they follow you. Or I was at one of those conferences a couple days ago, and an 8th grader, she was like, "Mr. Bradkey, oh my gosh, I missed you. Where were you?" And I was like, I was gone, like on a Thursday, Friday. But it was, to them, that's impossible, especially because like, I'll tell them if I'm gone, if I go to a conference or something. But when I had my car accident in September, it was totaled from the left-hand side. I was T-boned, and I had to miss school on Friday because I was in the hospital that night. And it was funny because the kids had no warning I was going to be gone. So on Monday when I came back, kids were like yelling at me. We're like, "Where were you?" And it's like, I was in the hospital. What? And they're like, "You didn't tell us you were going to be gone." And so it's funny when that happens, because you're like, oh, like I am making a difference. Clearly they don't like science because they're failing my class, but I missed a day of school, and they were visibly upset and were like, needed an answer. Like, why did you not show up?
Yeah, they missed you.
Yeah, and that is nice. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, that's got to feel good.
It really does. And it's like, oh, man. And it's hard to describe, because maybe I shouldn't feel like that way. I feel like sometimes I'm too close to the kids, and I'm not, like, because I think of some of the teachers I had, they were kind of like standoffish, not even standoffish, but like kind of removed. Like, I'm a teacher, you come in here, you learn, and you leave. And I'm very much the opposite. So sometimes I question myself. I'm like, I should probably be more professional. And like, maybe like sometimes I had one kid tell me about smoking weed, and he told me him and his friends did it, and I struggled with it because he was a good kid. He had A's. I knew he was fine. He was hanging with these bad kids, and he was like, I was honored that he was able to tell me, because clearly he was kind of conflicted with it. But now I'm like, I have this information. Like, what do I do with it? And so when that happened, I was definitely like, maybe there should be some distance between him and I. But I've dealt with it, and I think I'm just going to keep doing what I do, because I see the positive results. I see that the kids enjoy me. I see that I like to think I'm a positive impact on the school. And so at this point, I'm like, I'm not going to change myself. I'm just going to keep doing whatever it is I'm doing.
Yeah. And I mean, so a 7th grader coming to you about like smoking weed, for example, it's hard, because if you just say don't do it, it's not going to work. So it's more of like, how can you go about advising them to be like, listen, marijuana is not the worst thing in the world. However, you're very young, and at your age, it's probably not good for your brain's development. And although I would tell you in general, you're probably fine to use it in the future, it's like now is probably not a good time, you know? And it's like, how do you phrase that? Because realistically, you know, once they get to high school, all bets are off. You really just can't. I mean, they're gonna either do it or not. And the best thing that you can do is to at least inform them of what, you know, the pitfalls could be for it. And I mean, I started smoking early, you know, honestly. I smoked my first time, it was on my 15th birthday.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't smoke like for real, probably until I was more like 16, 17. Because it was like I smoked that first time, and then I maybe only smoked a few times then the rest of the year, and it would be very sporadic, and it was like a rare occasion. And I like to think I was not like excessive with it until like senior year, dude. It was like by senior year I stopped giving a fuck about high school.
Exactly. You're like, yeah, I'm out of here already, man.
Yeah. So it just makes you wonder, you know, what is the best strategy there? Because you can't lie to them and be like, yeah, marijuana's the devil's lettuce, you know, because you know that that's not true.
Exactly.
But at the same time, you don't really want a 7th grader smoking weed. Like, that's not good.
Exactly. And from my personal perspective, I mean, if you're in middle school, alcohol is illegal too. I would, in a disgusting way, I'd almost rather have you smoke weed than alcohol.
No, yeah, for
but
sure.
But again,
Same.
the problem is it's illegal, and I can't endorse it. And so it becomes this thing where every situation, and I know I'm a new teacher, every situation is the first time you have to deal with it. Like the kid with his abusive stepdad, the family problems, the drugs. It's every time someone approaches you, it's like, I didn't learn this in college. I guess I got to figure it out. And so you really just kind of stumble your way through it.
Yeah, like the scary part is the mistakes you make literally could fuck up somebody's life. Like,
absolutely,
that's where you got to be so careful with it. And there are some teachers who are not careful at all. So I think the fact that you're even like trying to think about it and trying to be the most mindful as possible, like that already is a good victory for you. But it's tough, man. You don't want to fuck up some kid's life for the rest of their life just because you told them the wrong thing.
Exactly. And yeah, it's one of those things where college, they teach you dumb stuff. You went to college, you know.
Yep.
And in the education program, 20% of what I learned I've used.
Yep.
The rest is just nonsense. And so it's just funny, right, where everything you do is, I hope I didn't screw them up too much. And I mean, I look back on my schooling. I remember the bad teachers. We talked about them. We knew why we hated them.
Yeah.
And so my goal, pretty much my number one goal, is to not do that. I found the stuff I liked. And like I had a 5th grade teacher. He's one of the coolest people ever. Remember, he called my house one day on a Friday and he talked to my mom. And he's like, I just want to let you know that your son Trevor is the man, the myth, and the legend. And it was a, say, 2-minute phone call. My mom was so happy, and she told me I was on cloud 9 for, I'm not joking, like 4 months. I was just like strutting through school like, yeah, that's right, I'm the man, the myth, and the legend. And it's just one of those things where, right, it was so simple, it was so easy, it cost him nothing, and it changed my life.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, I don't think about it every day, but it's one of those things where I look back and I'm like, no, that was a huge moment for my development. And so that's one of those things that they don't teach you in school, where they're like, no, you're on the front lines. Elementary school, they're children, they're super impressionable, but they're kids. Their parents are there. In middle school, they're at this age where they start learning on their own. So, right, like you said, you're given kind of these keys to where you can choose to help them, or, right, if you're having a bad day, you might say something that messes up a kid the rest of the middle school. And so that's the hardest part of the job, is you're always like, you're like an actor or like a comedian, you're always on stage.
Yep.
There's, from the second I walk in the room to the second I walk in my classroom, the first kid walks in, you have to be in a good mood until the end of the day when the last kid leaves. And I mean, I'm generally an affable person, almost to a fault, where I'm loud and obnoxious and I talk and I laugh, even if you're having a bad day. And I've had my bad days. Ask any kid. There's days where it's like, Mr. Bragg, he's not in the best mood. But even when that's happening, there is no sit at your desk and just lock yourself away in a cubicle. It's, all right, I'm just going to try to put a smile on and not snap on a kid if he asks me to borrow a pencil or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, and that's hard. Like, we forget. I think oftentimes as kids, we forget that teachers have lives outside of school. And especially when every time you see them every day and you interface with them, and it's always this like professional teacher, and they're the authority figure. And if you had to report an issue, you talk to them, and it's like, even on your break, you still might be susceptible to having to be a teacher.
Yeah, it is hard sometimes, because I'm 25. I'm still irresponsible in some aspects. I like to enjoy certain things in life. And the problem is, you have to tell a kid, right, like weed, it's not bad for you. We know that, but it's illegal. And it doesn't matter my opinions on it, whether I like it or not. The point is, right, when kids talk about it, you have to, it's illegal. You can't. And they're like, well, Mr. Brad, and like these kids nowadays are so educated. They know the information. They know the stats. And they're quoting stuff at you. And you're like, oh my gosh, you're like 12. You shouldn't know this. But it's hard because you have, nope, sorry, it's illegal. I can't. And politics is huge because I graduated college in May of 2016. And I started teaching with my own classroom in August. Yep. And so what happened was that was during Trump and Hillary. And so kids would talk about it. And I mean, because you couldn't hide it. And so what happened is you have to keep your opinions to yourself. It's just like religion. I was raised Catholic. I since am not, since I was pretty young. But it's like, right, kids will fight with you over like Jesus. And I'm like, we're talking about evolution or something, and it's like, no, we have to stay away from it. And they're like, why? But that's what Adam and Eve, and it's like, it's not real. But either way, it's like, I can't tell them that. Like, hey, guys, I'm an atheist. There's nothing after life, or I'm an agnostic or whatever. Just like, right, politics. Like, I think Trump is the devil. And I mean, that's pretty easy to say. I think most people believe that. But it's like, I can't tell the kids that because that's unfair. Like we said, they're impressionable. So I start sharing my own manifestos, and the kids go home. And before you know it, you've messed up a bunch of kids.
Yeah, you just created a cult.
Exactly. And I mean, cults are one thing, but cults full of children, that's usually where problems are. So we got to stay away from that.
Right. Yeah, you definitely don't want a bunch of kids just like, becoming part of your cult. Which actually, that leads me into another story you've told me before, which I think is really funny, is the T-shirt thing.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, tell a story about the T-shirts.
So what we do is we're a middle school. There's 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And what they did last year was they set up teams. So the 6th grade was a team. The 7th grade was a team. The 8th grade was a team. And there would be competitions like, okay, take attendance in first hour. And you sent in your number of tardies. And whichever team had the least amount of tardies, they get points. And you would do this thing. And it really wasn't taken super seriously. But there were standings. And there were team names. And I don't remember them from last year. But I remember we were in a room, and I said, how about our team name is the Little Bradkeys? And the teachers were kind of like, yeah. One teacher was like, nope, I don't think so. But no one really like said anything about it. Nobody was like, I vote no. And so we just kind of went on. And so by the end of the year, we were just known as the Little Bradkeys. So this year we started it again, and they were going to take it more seriously. So I think 6th grade was Team Dab. 8th grade was Team Inferno.
Logan Paul, man, he's fucking everything up.
Yeah, and the 7th grade was the Little Bradkeys. And so it's a chant. Like if I walk, like sometimes I'll walk into another teacher's room in the middle of a class. Like I'll have the kids working on something, and I'll just go like Kramer and Seinfeld into the other teachers that I proposed to's room, and I'll just like say something. Or like she printed papers in my room, and she printed way more than she needed. She sent it to the wrong printer, so I walked into a room with all these papers, and I just like threw them, and I ran. And so I do stuff like that, and when I do that, the kids are like, Little Bradkeys, and that's just our name. So I had this idea before Christmas. I was like, we need T-shirts because the 6th grade and the 8th grade both suck. We don't like them. It's all about 7th grade. We want to show our pride. And so I came up with the idea of a T-shirt. And so I floated it out to some kids. I mean, we have some creative kids. One kid, the first day of Christmas break, he created a logo for me, and he sent me, like, emailed my work email, like 9 different designs, and I was like, here you go, we could use this, all we need is a graphic. And so what we did was we're making T-shirts. The kids, they submitted designs for weeks. I'm still accepting them because we haven't found a great one, but kids, they're putting these designs up, and we're putting them on the board. And I've started to take orders, like not money yet, but see who wants what sizes. And so we're going to have T-shirts for Little Bradkeys. And so we decided that we, on Fridays, we're in the Spirit Day. Instead of wearing the school's colors, we're going to wear our Little Bradkey gear, and we're just going to like ride out in style. And that's how the 7th grades arrived, because the stupid 6th and 8th graders have, we have school spirit, and 7th graders are going to roll in like rebels with these Little Bradkey shirts on.
Dude, that's awesome, man. I feel like that tells you everything you need to know about how the kids view you in school, because clearly you're making an impact. You're helping them. You're keeping them entertained. You're not just like, boring and just delivering information, you're getting them engaged, and they wouldn't make a t-shirt after you if they didn't care about you.
Yeah, I guess if I was a teacher they didn't like, they probably wouldn't be in line to buy one.
No,
so
exactly.
I do take that as a huge compliment.
Hell yeah. Well, that's awesome, Trevor. I really enjoyed having you on. I really enjoyed having this conversation. You getting to share your stories, because I think they're great, man. And yeah, man, that was good.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fantastic. Actually, before I leave, do you think I could tell one more story?
Yeah. If you got another one, yeah.
There's just one, and it's kind of wild, so you need to stick with me from beginning to end. There is a message at the end, and it's great.
Okay.
So the teacher that I proposed to, all that stuff, one day I was in the office at the end of the day, and it was her after-school tutoring day, so she had kids in her room. And I came back to my room, and my room was a mess. Like, chairs were flipped, and on the very front table, ironically the one with a hole in it, there's a bunch of like stacked like a pyramid kind of, and at the top was, in her class, they had made models of like Aztec temples, and they put it on top, and that was how they messed with my room. And what I do is I think it's hilarious to overreact. So I went crazy. And there were some kids in my room. They're like, oh my gosh, it was the teacher. And then they would say some of the kids' names. So we ran out of my room. We sprinted to the other teacher's classroom. We tried to open the door because I was like, oh, we're going to mess up her classroom. And it was locked. And there was a student in particular. She's kind of the centerpiece of the story. And she was laughing at us in the little window. And so I'm pulling on the door. I'm like, open this door. And I'm banging on it. And you could hear the kids in the other room laughing. And she has her phone out. She's recording me. And I'm like, I'm going to write you up. I'm going to give you a referral if you don't open this door in 45 seconds. And another kid that was with me started his timer on his phone and had put 45 seconds up to the window. So it counted down and nothing. And then she started laughing at me. And then they got a piece of like kind of big construction paper and put it over the window. So I couldn't even see it anymore. And I was not okay with that. So we found the custodian and I'm like, you have to let me in her room. And she's like, oh, it doesn't look like they want you in there. And I'm like, no, they messed with my stuff. You got to help me. And all the kids are begging her. So she's like, okay. So kind of uneasily, she walks to the teacher's room and because they can't see out, so they don't know we're there. So she unlocks it and she opens the door real fast. And then, like Kramer, I bust in the room, all the kids, and I mean, we went crazy. We flipped her. She doesn't have, like, I have tables and chairs. She has desks. We were flipping desks. We were taking stuff. We just destroyed the place. And we took a bunch of stuff. We took like a box of colored pencils. We took a rug. We just took as much stuff as we wanted. And I told the girl, I said, I'm writing you up tomorrow. And we went to the room, and then the end. That's how the day finished. So then the next day comes, and I had this girl, the first class after lunch. And so she comes into class, and instead of sitting down, she kind of like saunters over to her seat. She's like, Mr. Bradkey, where's my referral? And I'm like, what? I've already forgotten. I'm like, what? She's like, whereas you said you were going to write me up, where's my referral? And she's like, she keeps saying it, and in front of the whole class. And, you know, being in middle school is like prison.
Yep.
And like, I'm the big man on campus and it's my classroom. I can't have someone step to me in prison. So I'm like, you need to think about what you're doing. You're disrupting the class. You're being disrespectful. She's like, yeah, but you told me you have a write-up. Where is it? And so I said, all right, now go in the hall. I was like, you're disrupting class. I'll deal with you in a minute. Go in the hall. So I sent her in the hall. And so we get started. And what I do is if I send kids outside for behavior or something, I usually forget about them. It'll be like 20 minutes later. They're like, hey, you left so-and-so out in the hall. And I'm like, oh, crap. And I have to go get them. But I knew she was out there. And so maybe 10 minutes later, the kids are finally to do their group work. I go outside and she's not there. And that's a big thing. I sent a kid out in the hallway. They disappeared. That's like definitely meeting with the principal. That's big stuff. And so there's a kid from another teacher outside in the hall, and they're like, oh, she went in, Mrs. So-and-so's class, the teacher I proposed to.
Yeah.
So I walked in, and I'm furious because I don't know what's going on. I just know that she's not where she should be. So I walk into the room. And the teacher's laughing. She's like, ha, 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 ha. And so, as you know, I can be stern if I want to. I could act a tiny bit and act serious. And so I get all serious and I shout to the class and I say the girl's name, like, I know you're in here and I know you're hiding from me. I said, you have 10 minutes to march yourself down to the office, because at 9 minutes and 30 seconds, I'm sending a kid down to the office. And if you're not in there, we're going to talk to the principal, we're going to talk to the assistant principal, and we're going to talk to your mother, and we're going to figure out why this is going on. And just walk out of the room. And normally when I leave, it's little Brad, he's just laughing. It's dead silent. And I see the look on this teacher's face like, uh-oh, I don't know what just happened. So then I go back to the class, and I still think this is serious. So I go back to the room. I'm kind of upset. Class ends. So then the kids go to the last class of the day. From my room to go to the last class of the day, and the teacher comes up to me. She's like, oh my God, Trevor, you have to stop. I told her to come into the room. It's not a big deal. She thinks she's going to be kicked off the basketball team, all this stuff. And so they let her out from the office to the last class of the day, and I go to the teacher, a guy across the hall who I'm good friends with, and I said, hey, when the bell rings, please send her to my room. I want to talk to her. And so he goes, oh, yeah, no problem. So class starts. I get them settled. She's in my room. I take her outside. And you could tell she's kind of upset. And I look at her, and I have bad news. I talked to the basketball coach, and it doesn't seem like you're going to be on the team anymore. And just the look on her face just drops. And it to the point where I felt bad. And then what happened was, for the first time in 2 days, I couldn't keep my act up anymore. And I smiled. And she looked at me. She's like, are you joking? And I just started laughing. And she was up against the wall. She slid down to the bottom, and she was really afraid. And it was like, part of me was like, oh, I think I went too far. And then she's like, how could you do that? How could you do that? And she's not crying, but you can see her eyes are wet. And I told her, and I said, you played with my room. I said, that's totally acceptable. Ha ha, we joked. You locked me out of the room. It's fine. It's after school. It's fun. I said, but the problem is, in front of the whole class, you challenged me. You told me you're giving me a referral. Where is it? And when you do that, now all of a sudden, if I don't respond strongly, everyone thinks I'm soft and they just walk all over me. And like I said, it's like prison. You got to stay the big man. You got to stay the biggest dude in prison. Yeah. And so we went through all that, and it was 2 days. It was from the end of a Tuesday to all Wednesday. And I guess the look on her face, it made me crack, and I couldn't help myself. And she was like, I can't believe you did that. And I said, do you understand why I did it? And she was like, yeah, I kind of get it. And I was like, we can continue to play. And to this day, she still kind of teases me and tortures me. We go back and forth. I said, but in class, you can't do that, because kids will do that sometimes. They try to test you and see what the reaction is. And every teacher deals with it, and every teacher knows you have to respond to it. The rule with teaching is, when you start the year off, you got to be mean. You can get nicer as the year goes on, but if you start the year nice and you try to get mean, they see right through it. They know they know you're weak, and they smell blood in the water. And that's kind of what happened to me last year. This year, not so much, but I've been pretty good about getting on stuff like that through these crazy long, torturous ordeals with the kids. But that is how, like I said, she learned a lesson. She wasn't kicked off the team or anything, and I saved face in front of the kids. So I considered it a long, drawn out lesson. Like, it could have been handled in 5 minutes, but she got the point. Everyone walked away from it happy. And so I was like, maybe I shouldn't have done this, but it was too damn funny to not. So that's why I'm here telling you about it.
No, that's hilarious, man. I do think there is that point where if you lost your credibility for whatever reason, then it does make it more difficult. It makes your job of teaching and affecting them harder. And it's not that you want to be mean to them. It's that if you don't put your foot down and you look soft, then they're not going to respect you. So
absolutely right. It is that prison mentality, or it's like the jungle, where it's like, okay, you're the big lion, but the second you show weakness, or the second they think they attack. And I do all the things I do, all the things I told you about, and I do that only because the kids know, when Mr. Bradkey turns on his mean face or turns on a serious face, everyone, you do your work. Like, I'll waste 20 minutes of class talking about whatever, something science related, sometimes not science related. But the second I say, all right, we need to get started, the kids look at my eyes and they know, oh, okay, now it's time. And as long as you do that, right, you spend hours and hours having fun. And yeah, as long as you establish that, which I struggled the first year, and I'm doing better this year. You establish that, then you're golden. And then you're able to have the best of both worlds, where you get to have fun with the kids, but also when you need work to get done, or if the principal walks by and you want to make sure your class looks like it's on task, then you go, oh, he's outside, get going. And then they put their head down and they start working. And we also established a thing where I'm like, all right, guys, if the last couple of minutes of class, sometimes we'll have free, especially like on a Friday, we'll have free time, or we'll talk about something not content related. We'll talk about like malaria or some. And so what we do is the policy with the kids, and we practice this, is that if anyone walks in, another teacher, a principal, anyone that's not me, you have to shout out something science related. And the kids are like, what? I said, seriously. I said, so you're talking about whatever. We're off topic. Someone comes in, you got to shout out something sciencey. And so kids are like, photosynthesis is the key word for most of the kids. So someone, and we practice it before. I'll have like a student, and I'll catch him in the hallway, be like, hey, walk in my room in like 90 seconds. And so say 90 seconds comes, he walks in the door, and then everyone shouts out. Like someone was like, salt. Some kids are like, photosynthesis. They just shout out like animal. Like that's just, it's so dumb. It serves no purpose, but it's one of those things. All right, the kids are entertained, and it's funny. And humor is always important to me. Since I was a kid, comedy has been my one goal. I love it. That's how I spend all my time. I listen to it, I laugh, and I've tried to bring that into the classroom. And so sometimes I leave work and I'm like, yeah, I don't get paid as much as, other people do, and I would like more money. But when it comes to fun at your job and how you spend those 8-9 hours at your job, I really can't think of a job that I'd be able to do what I do and have fun. You could keep that extra money. I'll take the money I make and have all the fun in the world that I have. Because if nothing else, it's given me hours and hours of stories to tell when we go out and hang out with our friends.
Exactly, man. No, that's awesome. And that's what you hope teachers would be about. Unfortunately, they're not all like that. But no, it's awesome, man. I want you to keep teaching, keep doing comedy, and I'll have you on again, and we'll tell some more stories, okay?
All right, sounds fantastic. I got a notebook full of them.
Hell yeah. All right, thanks, Trevor.
All right, thank you.